So I was just going about my day when I got into a Discord argument with someone about how incest was bad, and it was certainly a interesting experience that inspired me to make Assetflip Attorney, a game where you be a lawyer and argue with people to solve murders. Not the morality of incest. What started as a little project to learn how to make visual novels quickly evolved into a complete mess as I shoved hundreds of ideas I had been building up for years into it, and 4 months later it is done and released and I have no idea what to do with it. So here I am making a video essay on my own game since no one else is going to analyze it. Let's go. Right, so the way this video is going to work is I'm not going to spoil and analyse every single character, because I want to leave stuff for you to discover when you play the game. So instead, I'm just going to be going over the 4 major villains of the game and talking about them, but even then, I'll be leaving out stuff that people haven't discovered yet. With that said, we can begin by talking about the character of Mr. Monkey is essentially the main villain of Assetflip, being the leader of the big bad organisation Chimp Lab we spend the game taking down. The first few times we meet him, he is more or less a joke character, as he yaps about the wild and random stories he's been through. And he's usually a person of comfort, considering most of the other characters we talk to are a bunch of assholes.
You're bad, mate. I'll line every last one of your birds up and bomb them one by one. Fucking bear what most.
However, in certain scenarios, especially in flashbacks, we see that he has more of a serious side he can swap to when he needs, and it can be quite scary when he swaps into it out of the blue. He'll often rant on and on about how powerful he is and how he's mastered every hobby or killed every fictional character, which is played off as humour in the moment, but in retrospect, seeing how this makes him stand out compared to all the other goofball characters, yeah, it's kinda obvious that he's the villain. This represents the game in general, with Mr. Monkey's serious side representing the serious side of the game, and his goofball side we initially meet representing everything else of the game, aka all the shitpost stuff. Another character that represents the silly side of the game is Terry, who is pretty much the first person we meet, and his death at the hands of Mr. Monkey at the start of chapter 4, representing the funny, goofy side of the game dying out, as the story gets a bit more gritty and serious. Before we figure out that Mr. Monkey is the CEO, the only thing we really know about the CEO of Chimp Lab is that there's someone extremely powerful within the criminal underground who tends to abuse their power over really petty things. This is because Mr. Monkey isn't just a monkey for the sake of it, he also acts like one. Humans have evolved a long way since being monkeys, however one thing we haven't evolved out of is our instincts, as we tend to lash out or make irrational decisions. And Mr. Monkey represents this side of our brain, but if that's the case, why isn't he crashing out all the time like most monkeys do in real life? Well, it's because he has the ability to suppress his emotions in a weirdly supernatural way. If he doesn't want to experience happiness or grief, all he has to do is suppress those emotions and it's not a problem. This is not the case for his brother, Sir Monkey, who lets it all out 100% of the time. Which leads Sir Monkey to commit the most poorly executed murder possible, which is the murder we investigate in the first chapter of the game. The victim of this murder being Hara, someone who is the opposite of the monkeys, being incredibly human, hence why he is represented by the most generic human possible, who pretty much figured out Mr. Monkey was the CEO and had a plan to defeat him, only to be killed by Sir Monkey, his opposite, in an act of pure careless rage. Mr. Monkey ends up using Hara's appearance as a skin suit to disguise himself when committing certain crimes, which can be seen as him trying to be human and live a life he doesn't have. Since he doesn't really have that much of a life, in his origins it's pretty much the nursery rhyme of the 5 monkeys jumping on the bed, as Mr. Monkey and his brothers were messing about on the bed, much to the advice of his parents and doctor, before he accidentally fell off the bed and was put into a 20-year coma, where he was fully sentient and conscious. Instead of going insane like most others, he instead developed the ability to suppress his emotions to get through it, and once he got out of the coma, he discovered that his whole family was missing without a trace, which instilled two main themes into his head. Number 1, always listen to your elders no matter what, as they know more about you. And 2, life is meaningless and the world is cruel. This gave Mr. Monkey the objective to not be forgotten and to give himself a purpose, and the only way he saw able to do this was to destroy the universe, as by doing that he's leaving a permanent dent in reality, one which cannot be forgotten. To achieve this goal, he would weasel his way up in society, mainly the courtroom, and use the lesson he learned of respecting your elders to manipulate people to his will.
It's about time this kid respected his elders.
By forcing them to respect him. In his character intro, it is said Mr. Monkey's favourite song is Biggering, yes, the song from the Lorax. In the song, the singer, the onceler, sings about how he is biggering his goals, going from being satisfied with living in a cottage to wanting a business empire. Now how this relates to Mr. Monkey yet again comes down to the human brain, as it is always looking for more. Even if you achieve your dream, you'll just immediately set your sight on the next even bigger dream. And Mr. Monkey has biggered his goals so much that it has reached to the point of destroying the universe. There's also his favourite show of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now this is mostly just a little reference to how he's always yapping about his bizarre adventures, but if you want a deeper meaning, JoJo has two major themes. Family, which is obviously referring to Mr. Monkey's family and the jumping on the bed incident, and curses, and one of the main themes in Asset Flip Attorney is a curse known as the cycle. The cycle is one of the core themes of Asset Flip, and it's the idea that curses, generational trauma, and ideals from older generations will be passed down and corrupt the next generation. And another term for the cycle is the family tree of fate. And the trope in families, especially in the cycle, is to respect your elders, so everything kind of wraps back around in that way. However, this ideal he has of elder respect is challenged when he encounters Alcatraz, a character who is not only the one who killed Mr. Monkey's family, setting his whole motivations up, but also his father, essentially being his elder, which according to his principles, Mr. Monkey should respect no matter what. But clearly he ain't gonna respect the guy who killed his family, so his defiance against Alcatraz represents the closest thing to redemption he has. Although, speaking of Alcatraz, Alcatraz is the main villain of the secret chapter portion of the game, and unlike all the other villains who have rather vague introductions as they are slowly introduced, with Alcatraz we are immediately told that they are the villain and we have to stop them. The reason we are given this much direction that they're the bad guys is because outside of that, information on Alcatraz is the lowest out of everyone. They just kind of show up and start killing major characters and then leave. The first explanation of what they are that we're given is that they're an alien who had their home planet destroyed, so now they're looking to infect and take over this one. This is backed up as one of the many identities they disguise themselves as. Mr. Sad has a very weird view of the world, seeing people as tools, and reality itself is irrelevant when compared to himself, which is much like that of an alien, which is the complete opposite of Mr. Monkey's earthling-like perspective. However, later on we are told a second backstory to explain them, one which is a lot more complicated. This backstory tells of how they were made by God itself as a failsafe meant to destroy any life form that got too strong, which is based off the Great Filter Theory, a theory meant to explain why we have not met aliens yet, being that they were all wiped out by something and that we are next. This theme that the future is set in stone and there's nothing we can do about it is that of fate, which relates to how Mr. Monkey died, as he was wiped out by a meteor that just so happened to land on him before he could wipe out reality, as if it was fate itself and the universe rebelling against him. Later it is said that this meteor and Alcatraz come from the same place, so if this meteor is meant to represent destiny and fate, then Alcatraz must also relate to it in some way. Most of the time when talking to people, Alcatraz does it in his Mr. Sad disguise form. Very rarely does he do it using his authentic self, but when he does, he tends to say his true feelings on things, and this has only happened twice, once when talking to a character called Thyron, and the other with a character called Witchley. Thyron is a very religious guy. Living in medieval times, he has an unquestionable faith to his gods, whilst Witchley is the opposite, spending most of his time playing Minecraft and looking for the truths in the world. In both conversations, we see Alcatraz relentlessly yap to the two, trying to manipulate them and presenting himself as smart and above them. But it goes very differently in each conversation. With Thyron, the manipulation works as he gets scared, resulting to praying, allowing Alcatraz to manipulate and beat the shit out of him. And Alcatraz seems to be legitimately angry at Thyron, saying he hates him, talking about how humans suck, and putting a lot of emotions to cutting his limbs off. But why does he hate humans so much? In a flashback, we see him visit the centre of the universe in hopes of finding something that helps give meaning to his life, or at least something interesting. But upon finding nothing at the centre of the universe, he goes a bit insane as he discovers nothing really matters. And when he sees humans, especially ones like Thyron, he despises the fact that they have comfort in their small little lives. This is because he's a little jealous that they haven't had to go through the same existentialism as him. In his Mr. Sad form, he takes over the criminal organisation Chimp Lab and manipulates its members into having the same philosophy as him, trying to enforce his existentialism. Which is the opposite of Mr. Monkey, who kept his existentialism to himself, thinking he was the only person who could bear the weight of it. So they're both narcissists, but in very different ways. His favourite movie and TV shows are Neon Genesis and Parasite. Neon Genesis Evangelion conveying the themes of the end of the world and, well, overall meaninglessness, which I've discussed why that's relevant to him already. And Parasite conveying themes of parasitizing. Yes, that's an actual word, which means to infect or infest someone with parasites. In the movie, obviously it's more of a metaphor, but with Alcatraz, it's both a metaphor with how he's parasiting the minds of the people in Chimp Lab, and literally with how he's infecting the earth. There's also the main villain of Parasite, who is very detached from reality and society, so every conversation he has makes it feel like he's some kind of crazy alien, which is exactly what Alcatraz is. And even if you don't consider this guy as the main villain of Parasite, the two other candidates for main villain mimic two of the other villains I'll be talking about in this video, both in what they represent and what they do with their dynamic when it comes to the crazy alien character. There's a similar amount of depth to each character and their favourite song, movie or TV show, like with Mr. Monkey and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. However, JoJo's is quite long, so I'm not going to touch that today. Honourable mentions to his Mr. Sad form's favourite song of Dirty Harry, which is about the Afghan and Iraq war, or drugs, but the point still gets across that Alcatraz is trying to be a normal person as Mr. Sad, and him choosing this as his fake favourite song just goes to show what he thinks of us. But all that is shattered with his encounter with Witchley. He tries to do the same thing he did with Thyron, manipulating and insulting him, but Witchley is one giant nerd, and argues back with an eldritch horror like him like a nerd. So Alcatraz has to resort to trauma to scare Witchley off, but this moment where we see his tactics aren't working feels off. And in a speech by Hara, it's revealed that this whole Alcatraz existentialism and spreading his philosophy thing is all one big lie. Quote, Alcatraz is also known as the silence of the great filter. I don't know much about this one, but what I do know is that it is pretty primitive. It's more like an animal than an eldritch horror, but it tries to pretend not to be. It tries to act like it has motivations and agency, yet it is nothing but a mimic of humanity. It tries to be philosophical, but it is like an AI, it just repeats what it has heard. In a reality, it knows nothing about life. It is an animal who acts on instinct, more a natural evil than a moral one. Alcatraz does not actually think at all. He has no perspective on life, no ideology. He just says and does what he feels like in any given moment. He's not a villain with a complicated mind, but more so an animal trying to survive. As Harris says, he's a natural evil, like some kind of bacteria rather than a moral evil like Mr. Monkey. All those existential speeches he did, he made up on the spot. He does not believe in anything. He does not think or feel anything. Also in Harry's speech it is said natural evil and moral evil will always take each other out in the end, which is exactly what happens as Mr. Monkey dedicates the rest of his eternity to make sure Alcatraz cannot win, manipulating the fact that he is immortal to beat him down for all of eternity, and for the first time Alcatraz evolves out of being a bacteria and gains an emotion: fear. The concept of an eternal punishment in immortality is one of the most existential things out there, and Alcatraz was always yapping about existentialism to try and assert his dominance, but he never really understood what he was yapping about since he's an unthinking alien bacteria, so the fact that he has to go through the same thing he was always lying about believing in is an awfully ironic punishment. After all this, there is one question left over, and that's why is he such an asshole?
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
Idiot sandwich what?
If he's not jealous of humanity like we previously said and he's just indifferent towards them, then why does he act mean towards everyone? Well, it's simply because it works. All he has to do is threaten someone and they do his bidding. It's nothing personal, it's just how he gets stuff done. The first time we see him, his description is he speaks in the same tone, so when he's threatening us and congratulating us, he doesn't raise or lower his voice, he just speaks the exact same, like some kind of alien, because he is. Him speaking in the same tone also has that added benefit towards him of us not being able to tell when he's serious or joking, so we can never really grasp what his motivations behind any of his words are, making his goals even more mysterious, allowing him to get away with them. The scariest part about Alcatraz is how he killed everyone for literally no reason, not even for fun. He gets no enjoyment out of murdering people and just does it for the same reason a tornado does. It's just on the path it was set out to do. Unlike the next villain I'm gonna talk about, who does do it for fun. The main character, you. Our protagonist, whose name is literally you, starts out as a blank slate. They say the most basic answers to everything, and the reason they act this way is because they're an amnesiac, so they don't really have any memories to base their personality around. In the events of the game, Yu gets a job as a lawyer and starts an arc where they question if being a lawyer is worth it and will give them purpose. So they're kind of at a crossroads between Mr. Monkey's I need to find a purpose ideology and Alcatraz's nothing matters, don't try ideology.
Nothing matters because we're all gonna die someday!
Hey!
No, please don't kill me, please, no, I don't wanna die, please don't kill me, please don't.
But before we can make a choice, the character of Sinner comes along and says screw all that. Sinner is who Yu once was before they had their mind wiped and became an amnesiac. They're an assassin who was not only raised from birth to be a heartless killer, but was born for it, since they're a reincarnation of the Great Demon, who in this verse is basically evil incarnate, Satan. And if we make certain decisions throughout the game, Sinner will appear to us and tell us to start killing people and causing chaos, basically telling us what our purpose in life is before we can make that decision. And if it was anything else, this would be a good thing, as throughout the game Yu was always looking for a purpose to make their life meaningful, and now finally being told it straight to our face as a fact should be good, but it's doing evil. Throughout the game, defending innocence has built up a moral compass in us, so naturally we don't want to betray all that. Luckily we can easily ignore Sinner as they're just in our head and go about with our day. Most of the characters don't really see us as Sinner and as a different person, Yu. Well, except for one person. Dave. Dave is very much a parallel to Sinner. He has no purpose in life, he's a dirty gooner, and he's also weak as hell. He's a lot like Mr. Monkey in how he acts like a primate, except he's even more stupid and nowhere near as powerful as the monkey. Basically a train wreck of a person, but if there's one thing he has, it's humanity. After having a meltdown at the criminal organisation Chimp Lab, someone higher up in the company orders Sinner to kill Dave's entire entire family as punishment, and upon hearing this information, Dave immediately swears revenge, and even though Sinner is way more powerful than him, through his human indomitable spirit, he goes after them anyway. And it just so happens that in the world of asset flip, your power is determined not just through strength, but also through your mind, with how others perceive you and yourself, and Dave channeled his human indomitable spirit and his overall feelings of rejection into power, and managed to go toe to toe with Sinner, developing a rivalry. When we meet him in game, he recounts many stories on his insane battles with US Sinner, but they could never truly kill them. The best they could do was shoot Sinner square in the face, putting a bullet in their brain, which is what caused the mind wipe that made Sinner become you. Now one could argue that this was him killing Sinner, as now we're pretty much a different person, but he clearly does not see it that way and wants to finish the job. Although at least a part of him does see us as a different person, as he is hesitant to just immediately kill us and insists on having a fair fight, which is something he wouldn't do if he was entirely clouded by revenge. When it comes to the symbolism of Sinner, they kind of spell it out for us, as when defeating them they state a bunch of different pieces of media that also have the trope of a protagonist with a darker side within them. This trope is heavily associated with Freud's theory of the human psyche that states that there are three sides within us: the ID, the ego, and the superego. The ID is the instinctive, impulsive side within us, the one we got from monkeys that's really aggressive and a pleasure seeker, something that Sinner very clearly represents. Out of the three, the ID is the most important as a theme to the game, as the organisation Chimp Lab that the game centres around heavily relies on the ID, with all of its members being incredibly aggressive, instinctive and degenerate. Next is the superego, which despite its name is actually all about morality and doing the right thing, and being as selfless as possible, even if it's to your own detriment, so it's not always a good thing. The ego is represented by you, the player character, and who we are at the start of the game, who always says the most basic answers to everything. And lastly, there's the ego, which is kind of a mix of the previous two, being normal, mature and adaptive, basically just being the average person, mixing their own desires with also being a good person. So if the ID is represented by Sinner and the superego is represented by you, then who is the ego? Well, that's simply you, but by the end of the game, as after all the events with Dave, Sinner and taking down Mr. Monkey, they kind of grew as a person, going from a bland, boring, blank slate that is morally good all the time, to being an average person who feels more realistic. Another character who represents the average person would be Hara, and as we know, he was so close to beating Mr. Monkey before being killed in the McDonald's. So there's some symbolism there with how you walked in later that day and ended up fulfilling their role of the normal person and completing their plan of defeating Mr. Monkey. So, by the end of the game, Yu has solved the debate that they had with themselves at the beginning of the game, deciding it is worth it to put in the effort to chase your dreams, and has decided to finally find their purpose, whilst helping people along the way, finding a healthy balance between all three sides of their brain like anyone should, which is something they did not have before due to A, being evil incarnate, and B, having their mind wiped. However, with this arc complete, the metaphorical damage left behind the bullet in their brain is now resolved. The thing with Sinner is that they're aware of this whole human psyche thing and use it to their advantage, as they pretend to be a normal person to lure people in and kill them. However, unlike most assassins who only put on this facade of being normal, they kind of are. They don't just act, but also think like a normal, chill person, because that's just their personality. It just so happens that Sinner is also a deadly killer. And unlike some of the other villains who are master manipulators who will change their personality depending on who they're acting around, Sinner has no off switch. They'll always act in a casual, friendly tone, even when murdering people. And it's not even in a creepy way. To them, they're just trying to have a good time and live life to the fullest. Yes, they're aware of the pain they're causing to people, but that's just not really a concern for them. It's not really on their list of priorities. And they'll much rather prioritise the day-to-day, like keeping your hygiene in check, over human life. to them breathing and murdering are one of the same. There's a quote somewhere that talks about how psychopathic villains are scary because they will have a friendly conversation with you whilst also thinking about how they're going to murder you. Sinner is not just that, but will also persist the friendly conversation as they're murdering you. Sinner's favourite film is Pulp Fiction, a movie where its main protagonist goes from nonchalantly killing people and pissing about whilst doing so, to realising the weight of their actions and repenting. Sinner probably didn't get that last part, but this still parallels their journey of going from Sinner to you. When it comes to their interactions with the other villains, with Mr. Monkey, they are kind of fed up by Sinner. After having a battle that ends with a draw, Sinner is thrilled to find a worthy opponent and wants a rematch, whilst Mr. Monkey isn't really about fighting and is more about his goals and wants to move on to something else. Whilst of course fighting is bad, this hesitation from Mr. Monkey to live in the moment would end up biting his ass years later, as he would finally achieve his goals, only for Sinner, now as you, to defeat him, thus fulfilling the prophecy of a rematch. The dialogue here is also one-to-one with a scene from the film Iron Claw. The intention here is that you take the context from the scene in the movie and apply it to the scene in the game to see some of the hidden meaning with the social class element of it. With Mr. Monkey being a hard worker who has gone through a lot to reach where he is now, and Sinner being more privileged, being born into power as evil incarnate. And with Alcatraz, Sinner is the one who ends up getting fed up, as Alcatraz feels nothing even when killing people, which clashes with Sinner's ideology of getting a high when killing people. They also get into a brief argument, as Alcatraz wants to genocide everyone for the hell of it, which Sinner disagrees with, as if you kill everyone, there'll be no one left to kill. Also, Sinner likes to make their kills personal so they have more impact. When it comes to you, their favourite show is Odd Taxi, mainly because it has murder mystery and brain damage, two concepts very relevant to you, especially brain damage, both on a literal and a metaphorical level, and also how it affects them both in very physical, obvious ways, but also in subtle ways with how they act and talk to people, which is also present in Odd Taxi. And their favourite song is Bohemian Rhapsody, which if I'm being honest has hundreds of ways you can interpret as a metaphor for something related to you. The first verse conveys themes of emptiness and indifference, which shows how they feel at the beginning of the game. The second shows regret in murder, which can obviously be seen as their regret in the person they once were. The third verse conveys themes of facing something big and moving on with fate. This of course ties into the previously mentioned theme of fate, but also how they must confront Mr. Monkey. The next few verses has the vocalist argue with another vocalist, which could obviously be seen as representing Sinner, with the lines in this song literally contradicting lines from Sinner's favourite song, and the penultimate verse easily having the most depth, firstly with the line "just gotta get out of here." This can be seen as a more subtle jab at how they have to get out of the position they're in life, but you could also see it as a bit more literal, as the part of the game where Bohemian Rhapsody is revealed as their favourite song is during a part where they're locked in a bunker which they have to escape. The other line with depth here, Beelzebub has a devil aside for me, is more so tied to the religious imagery of the game, which we'll get into now. Sinner is often referred to as being a demon because they literally are, no explanation needed there. However, Mr. Monkey is also often referred as to being the devil, and if you call him a demon, he is quick to correct you that there is a difference. That being that devils are a lot more lawful, making more plans and building big hierarchies, which is obviously represented through Chimplab. Demons on the other hand are completely chaotic and random, which is what makes Sinner so dangerous. Other concepts include heaven and hell, which exist in assetflip Eternity but work a lot differently. Heaven is only open to people of royal blood, so if you're born in a royal family, when you die, you'll automatically go to heaven and become a god, whilst everyone else must go down to hell and suffer for their sins, but once doing that for long enough, they will be reincarnated back into the mortal realm. This is a pretty unfair and corrupt system which is destroyed by Sinner. It is said that in a past incarnation, Sinner fused heaven and hell with the mortal realm and genocided them, making it so that there would be no afterlife and it would just be eternal darkness. What remains of heaven and hell would end up becoming the beyond and the depths. And when Mr. Monkey got put in a coma, he would go to the beyond and gain his powers before getting thrusted down to the depths, which obviously mimics Lucifer, who just so happens to also be the devil. This past incarnation that Sinner wiped out heaven and hell as was also the king at the time, and since heaven and hell are heavily tied to the idea of beliefs, the fact that the king wiped out a belief can easily be seen as a metaphor for how those in power have control over the beliefs of the people. This could then be tied back into Chimp Lab and how Mr. Monkey and Alcatraz have control over its members like some kind of cult. And this idea of history repeating with the king in the past and Mr. Monkey and Alcatraz in the future then ties back into the theme of the cycle and events repeating themselves. This is also why you is the main character, as they're pretty much the only person to break the cycle and make it loop in on itself, as when Prosecutor Maxwell, the first major antagonist for the game, tries to dump his anger and ideologies onto us, we reject it and you instead forges their own path, causing Maxwell to reconsider his decisions, leading to you and Maxwell teaming up to take down Mr. Monkey, which leads to Mr. Monkey taking down the person who made him that way, Alcatraz. The people in the cycle are both victims for being abused by the person who was before them in the cycle, but also abusers for themselves because they abused the person next to them in the cycle. However, with this cycle implosion that we have going on, the people are able to reconsider who they were and strike back at their abusers, leading them to reconsider who they were, repeat until it reaches the original abuser who isn't a victim themselves, aka Alcatraz. However, you could argue that Alcatraz isn't the real villain, not because he doesn't have a concept of right and wrong, but mostly just because it's everyone's fault in playing a part in the cycle. This is embodied by everyone's favourite criminal organisation, Chimp Lab, which is literally built on top of hell and, as we just discussed, corrupts its members and plays the biggest part in the cycle. But even then, Chimp Lab is a victim in itself. You see, all the events of the game and the events of the cycle were all part of one greater plan. Chimp Lab's purpose was secretly to attract criminals like Mr. Monkey, Sinner and Alcatraz in hopes that they would take each other out. Who orchestrated this plan? Well, that would be the fourth and final villain, the Elder One. Taking things back a bit, one of the key characters in the cycle is the character of Fludge, who had not one but three, maybe even more if you think about it, different characters corrupting him. Despite this, he remains one of the more pure good people in the story, but he does allude to having a pretty dark past. This is elaborated on when he says he came from a cult-like family who did a bunch of really evil things that he ran away from. Then later during the final trial, amongst a heated argument, everyone can only seem to agree on one thing, and that someone known as the Elder One is a huge dickhead. The only detail we're given on who the Elder One is that they're the ruler of the one and only city in the world. The city has always been an odd plot point in the lore, as outside of the first chapter, where world building wasn't really an element yet, most of the game takes place in the primal zones of the east, where it's mostly just nature and any civilization is kinda small and abandoned. So whenever the city's mentioned, it always has this weird aura to it, as it juxtaposes the current atmosphere that we're always in of nature and isolation. And so when we hear that the Elder One is the ruler of this city, that weird aura carries over to him, immediately establishing his presence in the world. Also, unlike all the other characters who are very connected to hell and demons and devils and whatnot, the Elder One, since he's part of the royal family, if it was still around, he would have gone to heaven. And through a bit of paper we can find it's revealed that the Elder One is the leader of the Fludge cult family, meaning the two are related. So by that logic, Fludge is royal blood and thus technically someone who should have gone to heaven if it weren't destroyed, which makes it ironic that he ended up getting killed by a devil in the depths of hell. And if that weren't enough, it's also said that the Elder One managed to kill the god that created the universe, as well as kill King Ferox, Sinner's previous form that wiped out heaven and hell, putting himself above them as well. So despite being mentioned only a couple times and not even making an on-screen appearance, the Elder One has already established himself as a major player in the world, so when it's announced that he's going to be showing up soon, it's just as big of a deal to the player as it is to the characters in the world. But when he does show up, he doesn't really do a whole lot before leaving, as he sees Chimplab as disgusting and not worth his time. So this organisation that got built up a ton throughout the game in a single act has had its perception destroyed by the Elder One. Because to him, Chimplab is just complete degeneracy, the worst of humanity. But despite his views on Chimplab just being a bunch of degenerates, he isn't actually that far of a degenerate himself, since he is said to be about thousands of years old, but Fludge is only like 20-ish. The implications here speak for themselves. To make things worse, in a conversation he has with Fyron, who is one of his subordinates, it is implied that the people he is getting dirty with are essentially prostitutes. So unlike the other villains who have philosophies, this guy can't even keep to the morals of his own warped world, as he is the ultimate hypocrite. Another reason why he doesn't really spend a lot of time in Chimplab before leaving is that it's, well, the right thing to do if he wants to survive. All the other villains had a downfall because they yapped too much and got ahead of themselves, but Elder One, by staying reserved, doesn't really leave himself open to weaknesses. He remains cold and mysterious, well, most of the time, as in a singular instance when talking to Alkatraz after making sure he's in the clear, he goes on a whole diss track and rant against him, showing that he is not too different from the other villains. He still has an ego, he'll still rant on and on when he's given the chance, and he's still a bastard. He just knows how to get away with it. In one of the final scenes of the game, when the topic of Chimplab is brought up, he is completely uninterested, showing how taking down Chimplab was just the average Friday to him, just like how Chimplab killing people was just the average Friday to them. When it comes to what his motive is, he makes it pretty clear, that being he wants to make humanity peak during his lifetime, as if you make a graph of how good being alive is at any certain point in time, there has to be some point which is higher than the rest, and he's determined to make that point happen whilst he's still alive. Another thing that makes the Elder One juxtaposed with the rest of the villains is that he cannot live in the moment. Living in the moment is a very important theme of the game, as it's the counter to the core problem of the game of existentialism in death, and the Elder One just cannot do it. Alcatraz can live in the moment because he doesn't really think at all, and Mr. Monkey and Sinner can live in the moment because they appreciate life, but Elder One cannot do that. He is always and constantly fixated on making humanity peak. To him, time is not a concept, everything is just the same singular moment to him. The rise and fall of a civilization is no different to an ant walking past him. As for what happens to him next, well, we don't really know. This is where the game ends. The story of assetflip is just one of many to him, and he's probably just going to move on to the next. Obviously there is more to him, but you're just going to have to play the game and wait for the sequel to find out. Hell yeah, play the game, rate 10 out of 10, subscribe. All in all, if there's a common theme amongst these villains, it's existentialism and the emptiness that can come with it, and how it will corrupt you and the people around you. The exception to this is Sinner, who can enjoy life but in the very obviously wrong way, but once being shot in the face and guided, they become the hero of the story. And whilst they do kind of fall into their Elder One's plan by getting Chimplab indirectly all killed, you could make the argument that they were fated to die anyways, and if it weren't for you, Mr. Monkey would have won and destroyed everything, and also wouldn't have been able to stop Alcatraz from doing the same. All that, and that's only 4 out of the 30 character arcs. Damn. And that's not even including secrets about these 4 that no one have found yet, the connections between all these different arcs and the metaphors there, the 5th major villain which I had to cut because I don't even know how to describe them, and all of the metaphors not related to any specific characters and more so tied to objects and locations. But anyways, yeah, that's the end of this video. I'll be working on the sequel. If you want to see it or get it early, join my Discord, subscribe, and see ya. And of course, go play the game. It may start slow, but if anything in this video is to go by, it becomes peak.
Who's out here having dinner? Who could it be? Whose toes are those? Who's that great ape right there? Sugriva. Is it dinner time? Is it dinner time? Oh, I think it is. I think it is. Oh, what a big song. What a big song.
Made of Hitler! Command of the Third Reich! Little known fact, also dope points in my